Welcome to the Movement PT Coffee Cast, where we sit down and talk about physical therapy, health, and whatever else comes to mind during our coffee infused conversations.
How now, brown cow?
All right. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Movement PT Coffee Cast. My name's Dalton, and with me, as always, is my beautifully bearded friend, William. William, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I didn't tell you before the podcast, but not only do I have a cup of coffee, I also have a coffee scented candle.
Dang, man. That's like double whammy.
I know. I'm not gonna lie. I just kind of looked down and I saw it. So somebody must have given it to us. I'm not sure who, but yeah, it smells good. It smells like coffee.
The candle game is underrated, bro. Like I've never really been in it. But this Christmas, I got a couple candles. And dude, it's a game changer, man. You light one of those bad boys, you sit down, you got a cup of coffee, you got a book, game over.
There's nothing like some good old fashioned aromatics.
Oh man, how was Christmas, dude? How was the family?
Oh, everything was good, man. It's always like a busy time, but it's good to see everybody. Had a big kind of family get together on Sunday, so kind of more of the extended family got to kind of see everybody. So it was a lot. How about you?
Yeah, same, man. I have a lot of family like in London where I'm from or where I'm living. So I do stuff there, and then went back to the hometown of Harrow, Ontario to see my family from there. And it was good, man. It's nice to see a lot of family and friends in one place. You know, you don't get to do that too often. And I think I've underappreciated that over the years. So it was nice to do that.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's great, and holidays are a good time for that.
I also ate so much food, bro. And it's the desserts that get me, man. Like once you get into the desserts.
What's your go-to Christmas dessert?
Let me think here. My go-to Christmas dessert. So I number like in no specific order, and I think I may have said this before at some point, but like apple pie, cookies, ice cream, like in no specific order is my favorite things of all time. So this Christmas, actually, my aunt made this it's like an apple crumble, but on top of it is like a layer of like cheesecake icing. And then I had that with a side of candy cane ice cream. Done.
Oh,
so good.
Dude, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
My hearing aid battery died.
So can you hear me? Can you hear me right now?
Switching it up so that I can hear you better.
Man, I have to brush up on my sign language. I know the one where you have to go to the bathroom. Isn't it like something like this?
Are you doing sign language for me?
All right, guys, as Will gets his hearing aid intact, what we're going to do today is we're going to do our final cup of 2019. Today is December 31st, so we're one day away from 2020. I don't know when you guys will be consuming this episode, and if you are consuming it into 2020, welcome. I hope it's nice there. But what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of just reflect back on the last year of the podcast. Me and Will have done a bunch of interviews over the course of this year, a bunch of amazing interviews, and we've talked to a lot of great people that we're super thankful for them taking the time to come on and chat with us. We're going to pick one episode that stood out to us. There's a bunch. We could talk about every single episode, honestly. They're super valuable to us, but we both kind of picked one episode that really stuck out to us that we thought was valuable. So we'll comment a little bit on that. And then we'll kind of just talk a little bit about like what we're looking forward to in the new year, maybe a couple goals or a couple things that we want to accomplish individually and then as a squad. So, William, Um, before we do the whole podcast that we liked, I got a question for you.
Okay.
What has been something new that you've learned over the past year?
Hmm. I was thinking about that question. Um, I don't know if there's necessarily one thing that I've learned, but definitely learned a couple things. I think I think just like it sounds corny, but like trying to enjoy the process of doing things has been big for me in 2019. Just kind of like being okay with things kind of taking time and trying to enjoy things in the midst of that has been a huge thing. Another thing is I've met with a couple of like students that were trying to get into physio, who kind of reached out to us through the podcast, and meeting those guys. Shout out to Michael and Henry, who I met for coffee. That's been huge for me. Just like I've learned so much just by talking to them, and it's been very motivating for me to see such see them so ahead of the game, in terms of like what they're thinking about and what kind of questions they're asking. It blows my mind. I think that's a good sign of like things to come, and in terms of development of the profession, like earlier and earlier, and just that our messages are getting to some people. So that's awesome. I learned a lot from that experience. How about you?
Nice, man. Those are good. One thing on that topic, I want to kind of press a little bit. I like that idea. I think one of the things I would also agree with is trying to enjoy the process. And I know you're right. It does sound corny, but I think a big thing that I've done, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, is like you're always looking on to the next thing, especially if you're someone who's highly motivated or you want to, whatever it is you want to do, you want to continue to get better, learn more. You're always thinking to the next thing. You're always wishing, hoping, trying to develop more. And it is easy to get caught up in not really realizing what you're taking away from the current moment. So I guess my question for you would be like, what have you done to try to allow yourself to not get caught up in the process and really appreciate like the now moments or the short kind of term things?
Well, I think it's kind of just like trying not to be in multiple places and multiple spaces at once. Like if I'm going to the gym, I'm focused on going to the gym. If I'm hanging out with my fiance, like that's what I'm doing. I'm not like here and there at the same time. So that's been one way that I've kind of tried to do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I would say I've done something similar to that too, specifically with like my phone. I think that can be a big distractor, like you're saying, not being in the space that you're actually in. Um, Even at work too, like you can get caught up with it. So one one thing I've tried to do is kind of leave the phone away, put it on like do not disturb mode. So like when I'm at the clinic, like I'm focused on being at the clinic. When I'm working out or reading or doing something, trying to put it in the other room and try to stay focused. Yeah, that's definitely something I've also done. It's challenging, man. You don't realize it. Like I did a little social experiment with myself. I deleted all my social media apps off my phone. So like I deleted like my Snapchat, my Instagram, my Facebook, my Twitter, all off my phone. Like I still kept the accounts. So if I wanted to actually go and like look at stuff, I'd have to go to like the web browser version of them. And dude, it's crazy how much like you look at your phone without like realizing it. Like my screen time went down significantly. The one thing that like would make me like so like sad is that I would be so ingrained to like check my phone at certain times of the day that like I would literally pick up my phone like and go to look at it to go to like Instagram and like it's not there and I'm just like shit. I'm like this is like a random time I'm just looking at my phone for like no real reason but to just like look at my phone. So
I might have to try that.
yeah,
It's
I did
crazy how much it's insane how much you just pop things open and look at it.
for no reason. Yeah, it's kind of made
Yeah.
me be more mindful. Not that I will like I'll probably re-download the apps and stuff and get them back on my phone because like I it is what it is. Like
Yeah,
but
you're a Snapchatting machine.
oh yeah,
So.
you know me, bro. So, but yeah, it's cool. It's an interesting little thing to do. But yeah, back to some of the things that I've learned. Yeah, like obviously what we just talked about. Another big one I think is the importance of like taking time for yourself, whether that be through like a mindfulness approach, like a meditation or journaling or um, whatever you kind of use as that form of spending time with yourself, I think has been something that I've really learned to be valuable over the course of this year, specifically like the last 6 months of the year. I've tried to like develop a reflection practice, a journaling practice, and then doing some mindfulness. And it's really helped me a lot to just kind of stay grounded and honestly like answer some tough questions about yourself. You know, like I think we don't spend enough time thinking you know, about what we truly want in life and like what we want to learn and what we want to get out of it. There's so much distraction. There's so many other voices that kind of guide you to do what you do, even though you don't really realize it. So like taking that time to really sit with yourself and like develop your own framework and develop your own values to like to be able to like experience the world on your own terms, you know? So that's definitely something.
That's something I want to try a little more of maybe.
Yeah. Hey man, 2020 is coming up.
Some goals.
All right, enough of the deep motivational philosophical conversations. Let's talk about like the last year podcast, man. Take me through like your experience with it, and then you know we'll talk about the one podcast that you really enjoyed, and we can chat a little bit about some of the takeaways from that.
Yeah, totally. I was having a look through some of them, and there's a lot that stood out. You know, like, and just kind of, it's cool seeing sort of the things that have happened throughout the year, you know, when you're looking back. But yeah, I look back, you know, I saw Melody Hudson's with like Oreos and squats. I saw, you know, we've had even some different professions kind of on our podcast this year. You know, we had a physiatrist on. We talked with some strength coaches. Like, we did the event, the 24 Hours of Heroes event. So there was a lot of just like moments, you know, like looking back and just being like, oh, that's cool. Like, I think we kind of expanded our horizons of like what we're going to have on the podcast and what we're kind of going to do with it. So that's something that kind of like stood out to me when I was sort of looking back, is just seeing that the variety of kind of podcasts that we did this year.
Yeah, it's crazy. Sometimes I've been listening to some of our old episodes just for fun and like, you know, see how we've developed or like kind of takeaways. And I'll listen to them and I'm like, man, this is so good. Like there's so many good things on a lot of the old episodes that like, you know, sometimes you forget that you even, you know, had these conversations, you know, so it's like, it's cool to kind of reflect back on them and see some of the gems that get put out on the PT Coffee Cast.
Yeah, it's true. And like when you're actually recording the podcast, I don't know, you're so in the zone of the podcast. Like you said, it can kind of just, you sort of forget about it. And then, so it's good to go back and like listen to some of them and kind of just actually realize like, and kind of rethink about what was said and like by some of our guests, you know, and just kind of like actually dive into some of the knowledge bombs and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, you get the knowledge bombs that our guests drop, and then you get those cringeworthy moments of me saying some crazy shit that probably doesn't even make sense.
Me asking questions that aren't questions.
Oh man, it's all good. It's all good. So what was the one episode that you kind of highlighted when you were like looking back at some of the episodes that we did?
Yeah, I was looking at the strength therapist, Sam Spinelli.
Yeah.
So I was like listening to that podcast, and that was an awesome one. Talked about a lot of different things, but I love how he kind of like got into physio, and then his sort of like I can really resonate with a lot of his kind of thoughts, and he's so well read and just so much knowledge in there, and I learned a lot from that podcast.
Yeah, no, it was definitely really good information, and I think he actually changed his name on Instagram now. So I don't even think it is the strength therapist anymore.
Oh, is he just Dr. Sam Spinelli?
I think he did the old switch up, but yeah, I would agree. I think he has a lot of like his content is something I've been following for a long time, and to finally get a chance to sit down and talk to him and dive into a couple of his thoughts with regards to like strength and conditioning and physio and how those two worlds kind of collide is great. And I think Sam's a great representative of the physio profession to kind of speak out on, let's say, some of the, for lack of better terms, like BS that's put out there. I think he's very well read, experienced, and isn't afraid to kind of call out some of the BS that gets floated around. So I do really appreciate him, for stepping up and doing that at times, because it does take a lot. It does take a lot to do that, and you get a lot of backlash, and you got to deal with a lot of stuff. So it is like, cool to see him stepping out there and not being afraid to kind of speak his mind on certain topics that he is very passionate about.
Yeah, one of the things I took away from that was the whole idea of like language and how he kind of used to maybe phrase things in comparison to how he would phrase things with clients now. And he actually went through some tangible kind of examples, like it was about like Dalton comes in and has like a horrible valgus squat, and he also happens to have medial knee pain. And then Sam kind of took us through like how he used to phrase that when he was like coaching someone through that situation in comparison to how he would now. And then we dove into like why he would phrase it there, what's the kind of key components that are important within that. And that was cool just because you're seeing like real reasoning and thinking, and you're sort of diving into what makes a physio more than just exercises, like more than just training. It's all the stuff and the context around it. So that was really an insightful conversation.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it kind of gives you an idea of why like language is so important and how you phrase things is so important. And then it's cool to see someone like Sam who's acknowledging like that what he did in the past may not have been the best thing, and now he's like accepting that and now growing and moving forward and trying to be better. And I think that's a big thing for people to take away, is that, what we know right now is the best that we can do. And then once we know better or we know more, we need to be like, have enough humility to be like, all right, I was wrong. These things have changed. Let's grow with the growing information that we're learning. And I think that's a cool thing to see from someone like Sam, on top of the fact that you can get some real tangible ideas as to why language is important and how you phrase things are important.
Yeah, totally. What about you? Who are you kind of, who did you go and look at?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we did so many good episodes, man. Like it's hard to choose. Like just to highlight a couple, like it was so cool to do like AeroPress. That was a big thing for us. Super cool to sit down and talk with Joe Rinaldi again. Like that guy is always bringing the fire, and I feel like we need to get Joe back on the podcast for a third cup. Maybe we'll get him to kick off 2020 for us all, get us all hyped up. But like, love talking to Joe. We got to talk to like the physio tutors who are people that we've been following for like a long time and probably saved us in university. We got to have them on the podcast. So there's a lot of really good people, but one person that really, stuck out to me and I wanted to highlight was Dr. Ellie Summers, who's a physiotherapist out of Seattle. We had her on the podcast. couple months ago now, but she's just someone that like just brings so much fire. Like it just gets me hyped up. Like I love talking to people that are really passionate. And I think Ellie falls underneath that category. She's also kind of been a pretty vocal person on social media, and not being kind of afraid to speak her mind. So that's something that like I've really appreciated about her. And she also just has some really good pieces of advice and content in general, and specifically around for like the female population, and the female athlete, which I think is awesome. I think that's something that um, needs to be highlighted more, and we need women like Ellie Sommers or like Steph Allen. We need those people in the profession to like step up like they are, and having a voice for like the female athlete. So it's awesome to see that. A lot of what Ellie says, though, I think translates to every population that you see, and I think every physiotherapist or client that's looking to engage in healthcare should think. And I want to just highlight a couple things that stood out to me. She kind of ended on this in our podcast, and she talked about if the one thing that she could get across to the female athlete, and let's just I think this is for everyone too, is to help them understand that they're not fragile. And I think that's huge. Like that's probably one of the biggest things that we see day to day is people just thinking that they're so fragile, like that just because they have some knee pain or just because they have some noises in their joints, that like something is gonna tragically go wrong. So like I think us trying to make people feel less fragile and more resilient is super important. And then she touched on kind of having people be responsible for their own health. And I think that's a huge thing. Like for each individual, you need to take control of that. And I think what that means is like, if you're with a healthcare provider that let's say is not helping you, is not doing things that align with your goals, or taking steps to get you back to what you want to do, and that and you feel that, then you should leave. Like you are responsible for that. It's also your responsibility to take control of your own actions. So like if you come to a physiotherapist, you can't just dump all that responsibility onto the physio. And I think oftentimes that happens where we're like, oh, I'm in pain. I've been in pain for so long, like fix me, or it's on you to help me. And like, yes, it's on us to help. I would say facilitate or guide an individual to get back to the things that they want to do, or to help guide them to take control of like their pain. But being responsible for those things, it's your body, it's your mindset. You need to take control of it. I think those were two like really big like things that I took away from her episode, and I think are super important for people, whether it's a physiotherapist or as a client, to understand.
Yeah, that podcast, I remember being super fired up because she's so passionate and she brings so much energy to what she kind of what she stands behind, which is something that really stood out for that podcast, was just the general like feeling that you get from it. One thing I kind of like remember from that, just thinking back, was sort of similar to along the lines of what you were talking about, but the idea that like you're allowed to do what you want with your sort of body, and with exercise and training and stuff like that. And if you have some knee pain, ultimately you're in charge of whether you're okay with that amount of pain when you're kind of doing your thing, and it's not up to somebody else to make that decision for you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I remember her talking a lot about that. I just said knee pain, but just kind of like, doing things and being in charge of what you're all right with. And I thought that was like a very empowering message, because I think a lot of people put that in the hands of somebody else, and really, really it's up to you, and it's okay to consult and have people give you advice, and maybe help you kind of like you said, facilitate you towards like your goals. But ultimately, like if you want to do something, you can do it.
Yeah. No, I'm on board with that. I think Ellie did a great job of like bringing that message across to me and to the listeners. And also another thing that she had brought up that like I really liked, and this kind of goes back to what Sam was kind of doing, was she kind of talked about how she used to be very biomedical and using language and doing things that at what we know now is not the best approach. And she talked about how it's, you know, being introduced to the world of pain science and the biopsychosocial approach to care, that it kind of switched her mindset around how she's going to approach her clients. And I think, again, it's huge for people to take that leap and have that humility to be like, I once was doing this and now it's time to move forward. And I think there'll be a time when me and you have to sit down and be like, hey, like we used to do this and that's the best that we knew at that time, but now it's time for us to adjust and move forward and try to be better. So it's awesome to have people like Ellie and others who have, you know, a presence and a voice showing that humility to younger clinicians like such as ourselves, and hopefully the students and other clinicians that listen to our podcast can see that.
Agreed.
Dope. What let's talk about the new year, man. What is one thing you're hoping to like accomplish or get better at in 2020? And it can be physio related and it can be not physio related, whatever you wherever you choose to take this path, my friend.
Well, I think one thing I really want to do is read a little bit more. I've been kind of slacking in that regard. So I'm going to do like a combination of kind of, I think, research, blogs, and just like, you know, different books. Like they don't even have to be related to necessarily health and fitness, but yeah, just trying to read a little bit more. I think that's the biggest goal that I have right now. Getting married is another goal.
That is a goal, bro.
So
I mean, she said yes. She said yes, but there's still time.
There's still time. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so those two things. Yeah, and just doing more of the same. Like I really like, as I kind of mentioned earlier, like meeting with students and stuff like that if they're listening to podcasts. So just encouraging them to keep reaching out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. You should sign up for Physio Network. Let's plug them.
Physio Network?
Yeah,
definitely. I actually have read a couple of their articles in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, man, their stuff is really good. Like really good. Yeah. Yeah, for me, let's see. I would say, I think clinically, if I want to go that direction, one thing that I think I want to work on leading into like the new year is being like, this is going to sound weird, but like being more self-aware about like my nonverbal like communication, like my body language, my voice, my tone of voice, like my inflections, like different things like that. Shout out to Nick Hanna, but me and him always have some chats, and there's definitely times where like we'll be in the clinic and he'll look at me and just be like, bro, you gotta change your body language, man. You just look terrible. So he checks me a little bit, and we've been talking actually recently about like nonverbal communication and kind of how important that is to interacting with people, and how it's more about nonverbal as opposed to like your verbal interaction. So I think, and I know personally, like I'm someone who I tend to like very much display my emotions. Like if I'm not in a good place or I'm frustrated or I'm not hyped, like it's definitely easy to tell. And like, I show that through like my voice, my body language. And then the opposite effect is like when I'm in the zone and I'm like, I'm on, like, I'm definitely someone who's, in a good space and my body language is good and like I'm hype and, I can even notice that. So trying to figure out how I can just be more aware of those things when maybe I'm not in such a good place. So yeah, that would definitely be one thing clinically that I want to explore in 2020. And then outside of that, I think one of the big things for me, like physically, I want to do a triathlon. That's one of my goals for 2020. I've done some endurance type stuff in the past. Like I've ran a half marathon before, and I actually really do enjoy that. Like I enjoy the training and the process of getting ready for that. So I think my next physical feat is to try to accomplish a triathlon. The thing is, I cannot swim at all, like not even a little bit. Like I can maybe tread some water, but trying to get me to do a front crawl will be pretty hilarious. So it's definitely going to take some trial and error and some coaching, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I think once you kind of get away from sport and stuff, you kind of lose that side of stuff, like having a coach and like learning new skills. So I really want to try to like get back into that environment. It definitely makes me more motivated.
That's awesome, man. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. I'm sure we'll have some podcast updates about your process with that.
My first day of swimming, I'm going to show up with like a snorkel and
flippers
and some flippers and goggles and be like, all right, let's go.
Oh man. Well, yeah, that's a good goal, man. I think you can do it. I think it's going to be hard, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah, man. I'm excited. So just to kind of wrap up this episode, our last cup of 2020, mine's empty, or sorry, 2019. So mine's empty now, but just to kind of wrap it up and talk maybe about the future for us, I think for the podcast specifically, we love the podcast. I think it's something that we want to continue to do, obviously, into the new year. I mean, if you guys have been following us from the start, and especially of recently, like our Instagram content has definitely changed. Like we have not been consistently putting out content like we were before. And I think that's just a combination of just being busy with other things, trying to figure out what we really want to put out as content, so that we're not just pushing out content for the sake of putting it out there. So I think that's kind of why we've, kind of transitioned a little bit away from posting a lot of content. Hopefully in the new year, we kind of find our way. And I think it'll be more of the podcast, to be honest. I think that's something that we're really passionate about right now. It'll be probably less exercise content than it has been. But I think we're pretty happy with the podcast and want to continue to push that forward. So yeah, I mean, anything that you want to see, Will, for the podcast in 2020 in terms of like people or areas of conversation?
Well, still trying to get Hathor Bjornsson on the podcast, but I don't know if that's what you're looking for. No, I'm just kidding around. But no, I think I like the idea of like sort of like the combination between like Espresso Cast and just sort of having guests on. I don't really know where it's going to take us this year, but I'm always game for it to take us to kind of like new and interesting places.
Yeah. I would like to talk to some more like psychologists. Like I mean, we haven't talked to one, but I would like to dive into that realm a little bit. I'm pretty fascinated with that side of things, and like I think it would be really cool to sit down and talk with someone in that space. I think that's a big factor into just in general human interaction, and I think we could take a lot away from talking to more people in that space. So like, I mean, I guess if there's anyone listening that knows someone who would be interested in coming on the podcast to talk about that, or at least like, someone you consume their content that you think would be a good fit for us to have a conversation with, like hit us up. We really do want to sit down and talk with some people in that space. But other than that, man, I think we're just going to keep it steady. I think we have some really, really exciting things coming in 2020 that we're going to have to hold on to announcing, but we are definitely looking forward to the growth of the movement and our podcast and what we put out to you guys. So be patient with us, chill, have a couple coffees. New things are coming. We're excited. We hope you guys will be excited too. Will, you got anything else, man?
No, I don't think so.
All right, let's wrap it up.
Pretty much sums it up.
All right, let's wrap it up, guys. If you want to follow us on social media, you can follow us at the MVMTPTs on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you want to reach us via email, it's themovementpts@gmail.com. Lastly, if you've enjoyed our episodes, any one of our episodes in 2019 or this episode, head over to iTunes, subscribe, drop us a review, share it with one other person. It just helps us get around, spread our podcast, and we'd really appreciate it. And on that note, guys, we just want to say a big thank you to all of you, the listeners. If it wasn't for you, we would not be doing this. We appreciate every comment, subscription, review, anything like that. It does actually mean the world to us. Like, it's still to this day when I get a DM from someone who says they took value away from an episode or of one of our posts, it literally fills my heart, man. So please continue to show us love. It keeps us going. All right. We'll talk to you guys later. Peace.